There was a village at the edge of a dense forest where people believed time moved differently, though no one could prove it. And in that village lived a boy who had always felt like he didn't belong. Not because he was different on the outside, but because he noticed things others ignored, like how the wind sometimes paused before changing direction, or how shadows seemed to linger longer near the forest line. And ever since he was a child, his grandmother used to warn him, never enter the forest after sunset, because the forest doesn't just watch you, it remembers you. But Kiran never fully understood what she meant until the day everything changed. It was a late evening when the sky turned deep orange and the villagers hurried home. But Kiran, curious as always, stood staring at the forest, feeling an odd pull like something inside was calling him. And before he could stop himself, he took a step forward, then another, until he crossed the boundary. Everyone feared, and immediately the air felt heavier, quieter, as if even sound didn't dare to travel there. And though fear crept into his chest, curiosity pushed him deeper until he came across something impossible. A narrow path glowing faintly under his feet. A path he had never seen before. As he followed it, the forest began to change. The trees grew taller, the shadows darker, and then suddenly he heard a voice behind him whisper, "You shouldn't be here." And he turned quickly but saw no one, his heart racing, yet the path ahead seemed to glow brighter, pulling him forward, and after what felt like hours, though he couldn't tell if time had passed at all, he reached a small clearing where an old, broken clock tower stood, covered in vines and moss, ticking loudly despite having no visible clock hands, and standing before it was a girl about his age with pale eyes and a calm expression, as if she had been waiting for him. "You're late," she said softly, and Kiran froze confused. "Do I know you?" he asked, but she simply smiled. "Not yet." And something about her voice felt familiar, like a forgotten memory. And before he could question further, the ticking of the tower grew louder, echoing through the clearing, making his head spin, and suddenly he saw flashes. People running, shadows moving, the forest shifting, and he stumbled back. "What is this place?" he asked, his voice shaking, and the girl slept closer. "This is where time breaks," she said, pointing at the tower. "And once you enter, you can't leave the same." And Kiran wanted to run, to escape, but his feet wouldn't move. And then she said something that made his blood run cold. "You've been here before." And Kiran shook his head. "That's not possible." She raised her hand and the ticking stopped completely. And in that silence, he suddenly remembered a faint memory of being lost as a child, of crying in the forest, of seeing the same tower and the same girl, and then everything went dark, and he stepped back in shock. "No, I would remember," he whispered. But she looked at him with sadness. "You didn't forget. It was taken from you." And before he could ask what she meant, the ground trembled. The ticking resumed violently, and the forest around them began to shift. Trees bending unnaturally, shadows stretching like they were alive. "It's waking up," she said urgently, grabbing his hand. "We don't have much time." And Kiran's mind raced. "What's waking up?" he asked, and she looked toward the tower, her expression serious. The thing that feeds on time. And before he could process that, a deep rumble echoed through the clearing, and from the darkness behind the tower, something began to emerge, not fully visible but massive, like the shape made of shadows and fragments of memories. Its presence alone making the hair feeling suffocating, and Kiran's legs nearly gave out. "What is that?" he whispered, and the girl tightened his grip on his hand. "It's the reason people never return from this forest." And suddenly the creature let out a low, echoing sound that wasn't quite a roar, but something more disturbing, like whispers layered over each other, and Kiran felt something pulling at his mind, as if it's trying to take something from him. "Don't listen," the girl said quickly. "It feeds on your past." And Kiran shut his eyes, but memories began flashing uncontrollably. His childhood, his family, his fears, and he felt them slipping away like sand through his fingers. "Make it stop," she shouted, and the girl stepped in front of him, raising her hand toward the creature, and suddenly the ticking from the tower aligned into a steady rhythm, pushing the shadows back slightly. "We have to reset the tower," she said, breathing heavily, "or it will take everything." And Kiran didn't understand, but he knew that didn't have time. "What do I do?" he asked, and she looked at him, her eyes filled with urgency. "The tower needs a memory, a strong one, something real." And Kiran hesitated. "What happens if I give it?" And she paused for a second before answering. "You'll lose it forever." Kiran felt fear grip him because memories were all he had. But behind him, the creature moved closer, the whispers growing louder, and he realized if he didn't act, he would lose everything anyway. And so he closed his eyes and thought of the strongest memory he had. His grandmother smiling, telling him stories, warning him about the forest, and his chest tightened. "I'm sorry," he whispered as he reached toward the tower. The ticking slowed, waiting, and the moment he held this girl's hand and touched it, a blinding light filled the clearing, and he felt something being pulled out of him, something deep and painful, and he screamed, but didn't pull away. And then, suddenly, everything went silent, and when the light faded, the forest was still, the shadows gone, the creature disappeared, and the tower stood quiet, no longer ticking, and Kiran collapsed to the ground, breathing heavily, his mind blank. And the girl knelt beside him, her expression soft but sad. "You did it," she said gently. And Kiran looked at her confused. "Did what?" he asked, and she froze for a moment before forcing a small smile. "You saved the village." And Kiran nodded slowly, though he didn't fully understand. And as they walked back toward the edge of the forest, the world seemed no again. The air lighter, the sounds littering, and when they reached the boundary, Kiran turned to her. "Will I see you again?" he asked, and she hesitated before replying. "Maybe, if you remember." And something about her words felt important, but he couldn't quite grasp why. And as he stepped out of the forest, he turned back one last time, but she was gone, as if she had never been there. And when he returned home, his grandmother hugged him tightly, tears in her eyes. "You were gone all night," she said. And Kiran blinked in confusion because it had been only a few hours. Days passed and life returned to normal, but sometimes Kiran would feel a strange emptiness, like Something important was missing, something he couldn't remember no matter how hard he tried. And far away, deep in the forest, the girl stood near the silent tower, watching the path where he had left. And she whispered softly, "You chose them over me again." And though her voice was calm, there was sadness in her eyes, because she knew the truth Kiran no longer remembered, that the memory he gave to the tower wasn't just any memory, it was the memory of her. The first time they met, the time they laughed, the time they promised to find each other again. And now, once again, she was the only one who remembered, standing alone in a place where time could be broken but never truly undone.